you can create some really interesting effects when you combine SketchUp with an image editing program like Photoshop. And in this video, we're going to look at one of those effects. Now, I have a model here that I found in the 3D warehouse. This was created by J-Man, who is a tremendous SketchUp modeler and an all-around great guy. So with this model, what we're going to do is export a couple of images and combine them in an interesting way in Photoshop. Here's the images that we're going to export. We're going to combine those together to create this image where we have in focus foreground and blurred out background, similar to what you would get if you're using a camera and we're simulating the depth of field of the camera. So in SketchUp, first thing we're going to do is open up our Styles dialog box. Go ahead and edit your style. You might have sky turned on or background turned on. Make your background white, turn sky and ground off, and under edges, create an edge style that you like. I'm just going to turn profiles and other edge styles off. Remember that if you do this a lot, you can save these styles out, and that will help speed up your process. For our purposes, we're just going to go through and export these images. So I'll go to File, Export, export this as a JPEG. Remember to change the options if you want to turn up the size of your JPEG. And there's our first image. Note that I have the shadows on. Now for the second one, I'm going to edit and turn it into a hidden line mode. So I have just the edges. Pull up my shadows dialog box and turn the shadows off. I only want to see the edges. And there we go, we're ready to export, and we export that image out. Same settings as before. We want to make sure these images are the same size. For the third image, open your shadow settings. If you don't see the light and dark tabs, expand the window and push both of those towards the right. Now back in Styles, under Edges, we're going to keep display edges on, but we're going to lighten them up so that they're almost purely white. Okay, here's the neat part. Open the Fog dialog box, turn the fog on. We don't see a lot of change, but under the color, uncheck Use Background Color and make the color black. Now you can see some fog effects going on. Not your typical ones, but this is going to act for us as a depth map. We're going to move the slider so that we have the foreground in a very white and the background starts to fade out towards black. So you can see that front boom is white and the back, I'm pushing it so that some of it's even in total black, which is going to create a really good depth of field. With that ready, we got export this graphic and we're ready to go to Photoshop. One last note that some of you may have picked up on. You may have wondered why we didn't just turn the display edges off for the depth of field. This actually would be the ideal method, but sometimes SketchUp, when you try and export with these settings on, it just exports the edges anyway. So push those edges toward the white side. If you push them too far, this is what you'll get. It'll reverse and you'll have white edges on a black background. If that's the case, push your edges back to black and then push the slider back up into the mid 90s and you'll be okay. This will work fine for what we're doing. Okay, here we are in Photoshop. I'm just going to drag these images in, or you can open them. I'm showing this on a PC, but of course the steps are very similar on a Mac. So we have our line image, our depth of field, and our color. The first thing that we'll look at is the layers. On the color layer, double click on the background layer to turn it into a normal layer. And then I'm going to add another layer. We want to fill this layer with white to act as a background for us. You can do that through the edit menu. Fill it with white. And then drag it so it's at the bottom of the stack. Now select the lines image that we brought in, Control A or Apple A to select everything. You can also do this through the menus if you prefer. We're going to copy that, and then in the color image we're going to paste it. Again, use the menus or Control V or Apple V. That new line layer, change the mode to multiply, which will let us see through everything that's white, basically just showing the lines. Now we're going to come back to that later. We just wanted to put it in the stack. But now that we have it, we can close out that image. Now select the depth image, and again, select the whole image, so Control A or Apple A. Then going back to your color image, select the color layer and add what's called a layer mask. Now this layer mask is important, and you see you can select either the color image or the layer mask. But you want to hold the Alt key or Apple key and click on the layer mask to actually affect the layer mask. We're going to paste that depth map, which we copied, now paste into the layer mask. Now let's see what happens when we look at this. What's the effect of this? When we come back and see this, what the layer mask does is it actually tells Photoshop what to show and what not to show based on how dark or light it is. You can see what happens when we disable or enable the layer mask. This is actually a pretty cool effect on its own. We could turn the lines back on, and it's kind of a cool effect to get this color shading out. But this layer mask is also going to help us to create the depth of field blur. Go up to the filter menu, go to blur, and choose LensBlur. Now for source, it probably is set at none by default. Select layer mask, and then for blur focal distance, this slider right here. What this does is, you may not be able to see this very well, but it sort of affects where your focal point is. Well, for our purposes, we're just going to slide it all the way to the right. Get the full effect of our layer mask. You can invert your mask so that you can reverse what's blurred out and what's in focus. The rest of these sliders you can go ahead and play with, but we're not going to cover here. One thing that I'm going to add a little bit is noise. That's just a personal preference. You can see it adds noise into the area that would be blurred. And you usually don't need a lot to get the effect. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of noise. And that's it. We're done with this. This is the effect. Using that layer mask or using fog in SketchUp to create this depth of field or this depth map, we can use that to create the layer map. Now we don't see the effect right away, and that's because this layer mask is still enabled. Disable the layer mask. That's through a right-click menu or context click, and there you have it. Again, we turn the lines on to just get a little more of the edges, but that may not be the effect you want. So I'm going to add another layer mask to the edges, copy the depth map, and paste it into that layer mask like we did before. Again, hold the Alt or Apple key, click on the layer mask to actually affect the layer mask and paste it in. This is it, the finished effect. One of many that you can accomplish when you combine some of the cool exporting options with SketchUp and the image editing effects in Photoshop.